guys, Samuel Allred here. Welcome back to the Persistence Outdoors podcast. Today we're going to talk about how to choose a backpack. We'll go over capacity, features, internal versus external frames, and then wrap up by talking about the fit. I really enjoy hunting with a backpack. Even if I'm just going for a day hunt, I like to have my backpack with me because of all the different options it provides. With my 10 essentials in my bag, I feel pretty comfortable hiking far away from the truck because I know that even if a storm rolls in or I have to stay out longer than I expect, I'll be fine. With all that carrying capacity as well, I'm able to pack out medium-sized animals like deer in 1 or 2 trips. That means that I can go places where people who plan to drag their animal back to the truck would never dream. And finally, my backpack serves as a portable shooting rest. In mountainous country, it's an essential part of my prone shooting system. Prone just means shooting from laying down. And I've also recently learned a way to shoot sitting up using trekking poles as my front rest and my backpack as a rear rest. It's a great way to get steady on a slope in steep country. So all that to say, backpacks are super versatile. I like having one on my hunts. And if you ever plan to get into multi-day hunts with camp on your back, you're going to need a solid backpack. Before we get into it, if you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to support the show by hitting that follow button, leaving a 5-star review, or sharing an episode with a friend. All these things will help the podcast grow, and together, we will help more people get outside and into hunting. So thanks so much for supporting the show, and let's get into it. All right, so the first thing that I think about when trying to choose a backpack is the capacity. How much room inside of the backpack do I need? And this is going to be determined by a couple different questions. So, how long do you want to hunt? Are you trying to find a backpack for a day hunt or for overnight weekend trips? Or are you trying to find something that will sustain you for extended trips, like 5 days or more than that? Obviously, that's going to change how much capacity you need in your backpack. Another question is, what kind of gear do you have? Are you sort of an ultralight minimalist, cutting edge gear type of person? Or do you have surplus military, old stuff that's all bulky and heavy? That's going to make a big difference because if you are the type of person who's minimalist and has invested in ultralight gear, you're going to be able to get away with a lot less capacity than someone on the other end of the spectrum. Another good question is, what do you have to pack out? If you're packing out white-tailed deer or turkeys even, you're going to need a lot different backpack than if you're trying to pack out animals like elk, where you're going to have to make multiple trips with very heavy loads. And then finally, you might consider the seasonality of your hunting season. Are you hunting in the winter a lot? Because if you are, you're likely going to bring more layers, and that is going to take up more space in your pack. Whereas if you're hunting in warmer seasons, say you're hunting in late spring for bears and you want to pack specifically for that, just as an example, you're not going to need all those heavy layers that you might need in the winter. So the season that you're going to use your backpack in makes a difference as well. Figuring out the capacity can be tricky though. So I have come up with a guideline for you. And these are based on my own experience and then also research on the internet, kind of all compiled together. So it is a guideline. Everybody is going to have different needs and preferences, but this will give you a good place to start. Another thing you should know is that this guideline is for your gear, your food, and your water. The things you know you will have on your trip with you. This doesn't include capacity for meat. So we are going to talk about capacity for meat in a bit, talk about having internal capacity versus having a load shelf. These guidelines are only for the gear and food and water that you're starting out with. So keep that in mind. So for a day pack, you're looking at up to 2,000 cubic inches. A little bit smaller would be just your water, your knife, maybe a first aid kit. A little bit bigger would be if you also need something to pack a little meat out with, or if you're bringing gear for your kid, or if it's winter and you want to pack some layers. But around up to 2,000 cubic inches will do you pretty good. If you are planning to hunt with a day pack, you may also need some other type of backpack to get your meat out. So if let's say you're hunting archery elk, you want to run a day pack because it's super lightweight and you can go faster and further. Good idea, but once you kill that elk, you're going to need something to haul the meat out with. So you could look into getting an external frame backpack that is just made for hauling big, heavy loads. And you kill the animal, you quarter it out, you hang up the quarters, and then you come back later with your other backpack to haul it out. So that is an option. Now, if you are planning to go on an overnight trip, a 2-day trip, just you're a weekend warrior, like I myself often am, 2,000 to 3,500 cubic inches is a good range. And again, this is just for your gear, your water, your food. 2,000 to 3,500 cubic inches should hold you over. And this is nice because on the bigger end of that, you could also consider carrying out more meat if you needed to put a quarter of a bigger animal in there, for example. Now, for multi-day trips, we're talking maybe 3 to 5 days, you're looking in that 3,000 to 5,000 cubic inches range. And if you're going on a longer trip, you'll want a bigger backpack so you can accommodate all that extra food that you're going to be carrying. And also, if you don't have the most cutting edge ultralight gear, you might look at a bigger backpack just so you have room for your gear. Personally, my backpack is around 4,000 cubic inches. It's actually measured in liters. It's like a 65-liter backpack because it's a backpacking backpack. And most of those are measured with the European measurement. But it's around 4,000 cubic inches, and it fits right in this multi-day range. And I have kind of a mix between some really nice gear and some really cheap gear that I got off the internet. Some of it is very lightweight, some of it is not ideal, but it all seems to fit in my backpack. And I could easily do a 6-day trip out of that backpack, especially if it was in the summer, in warmer months. If it was in colder months, I would probably want to do a shorter trip or get a bigger backpack. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. For extended trips, 5+ days, you're looking at 4,000 to 6,000 cubic inches. 6,000 cubic inches is a lot of capacity. So you're just thinking about being out for a long time. Maybe you're hauling in components of your base camp. Maybe you're hauling in lots and lots of food, and you just need that extra capacity. Now, these capacities aren't including the room that you need to haul out meat. And so there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can take your backpack, and then once you kill an animal, you can leave all the stuff in your backpack and haul meat out that way. So me with my pack, it's around 4,000 cubic inches. If I'm on any sort of hunt and I have a lot of gear in my backpack, once I kill an animal, my plan is usually to leave my non-essential gear near the kill, take out as much meat as possible in that first trip. And in 4,000 cubic inches, I've been able to pack out small deer with gear. I could easily fit an elk quarter in that pack, but I'm not going to have lots of extra room once I load up my pack with meat for all my gear. So that's something to consider, is if you're hoping to pack out a whole bunch of meat with all your camp on your back, you're going to need to add some extra capacity. Generally, I've liked my backpack at about 4,000 cubic inches, but if I did it again, I would buy something closer to 5,000. I just think having that extra capacity would be helpful when I have all my extra hunting gear and then once I actually kill an animal. Now, you could get a super, super big backpack, like one that's meant for extended trips, and just say, once I kill an animal, I'm going to put that meat in on top of everything else I have. Before you go buy the biggest backpack possible, though, remember a couple things. One, how much weight can you actually carry? If you have 45 pounds of camp on your back, and then you're planning to add 100 pounds of meat on top of that, you're looking for an injury. I mean, you need to be very fit and very strong to be able to do something like that. So in some ways, if you're not ready for that super heavy load, you're not going to need that capacity. You're going to make multiple trips regardless. The other thing to think about is, what if you want to use your backpack for just a day hunt? The nice thing about my backpack is it kind of cinches down and I can wear it on a day hunt and it doesn't really disturb me that much. If you had one of these huge backpacks, it could get annoying on a day hunt. It could just be flapping around, making noises, catching on brush, whatever. So keep that in mind. You may not want to get the biggest backpack out there, but you do want something big enough to put some meat in it, put some gear in it. Maybe if you're a dad or a mom, carry some of your kids' gear, all of that. Before we move on to talk about features, I'm going to give you a really easy tip. And that is, if you're worried about the capacity, buy the backpack and then pack it like you normally would for a trip. Put all your gear in there, everything you can think of, and see if you have enough capacity. And if you do, you're good to go. If you don't, then you'll find out it's too small and you can go and get something bigger. But you should be able to easily pack a bag and it's not going to make it too dirty, right? And if it doesn't work, just return it and no harm, no foul. Okay, so you have an idea of what capacity you need for your bag. Let's talk about features. Largely what you're comparing is a highly organized pack with all sorts of pockets and zippers versus a more streamlined minimalist pack. And there are advantages to both. Let's go through them. So if you have a backpack that has lots of pockets, it's going to be easier for someone who likes to organize their gear. So if you like having a specific place for your first aid kit, or you like having a specific place for your water bottle, having all those pockets are going to make it very easy for you in the field to access the things that you want. And that can be very helpful. If you have a lot of things to bring, that can be very helpful. Now, the downside of having all these pockets and also zippers and extra straps and things like that is that it's going to weigh more. And there's more points of failure. So more things that can just break on your backpack. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the much more streamlined backpacks, but these are going to be harder to stay organized with because it might just be a big bag, a big cylindrical bag. And that can be very frustrating if you have a lot of things or if there's things that you need to access frequently. So it kind of depends on personal preference. Right now, the bag that I have is very organized. There's lots of pockets on it. And honestly, I find it kind of overwhelming and I wish it was more streamlined. I don't really care for all the different pockets. I would rather save, the pound of weight or whatever it is on the backpack. And while it can be nice and I've figured out ways to use them, I would just rather have it be one big bag and rummage around in it when I need to. Now, one thing that I wouldn't skimp on are straps and cinches. On the outside of the bag, having some different attachment points can be really helpful. And that is one nice thing about my bag, is that although it's a backpacking pack, there are straps and cinches and pockets that allow me to even put my rifle on the bag and strap it to my bag, which is super helpful when I'm trying to walk out of somewhere, maybe downhill with both hands on trekking poles. And so even though it's not built for hunting, it has the versatility to do things that I want to do when I'm hunting. And that makes it really nice. So if you're looking for a bag, you just kind of have to strike a balance that makes sense to you. Some other features you might look for are a rifle pocket. These are going to be on hunting specific backpacks, but having that place to put your rifle is super helpful, like I just said. You might want to consider a rain cover for your bag. Some come with rain covers, others don't. So that's always a good thing to check. A rain cover is just your first line of defense to keep everything in your bag dry. And if you don't want to pack your stuff in your bag in a dry bag already, having a rain cover is a great way to go. It also, when you're wearing a backpack with a rain cover on, it also keeps you a little bit more dry, which is nice. One distinction you'll see a lot when it comes to features are hunting versus backpacking backpacks. And hunting backpacks are often going to have MOLLE attachment points. They are going to have those rifle slings. They may have load shelves, which we'll talk about in a moment. And those can all be super helpful features for hunters. On the other hand, backpacking packs are more streamlined. They may look nicer. They may be lighter weight. You have to remember with backpacking backpacks, though, that most backpackers are not carrying over 45 pounds. And so some of these packs aren't rated or constructed for very, very heavy loads. My experience with my backpacking backpack, it's a Baltoro 65. It's made by Gregory. I think it's rated for 50 pounds, and I've put over 100 pounds in it, and the pack's been fine. So depending on the construction, it may do just fine, but it's something to keep in mind when you're choosing a pack for a specific purpose. All right, let's talk about internal versus external frame packs, and as promised, load shelves. So what is an internal or an external frame pack? Well, an external frame backpack uses rigid materials to create the structure of the pack, and it's usually some sort of lightweight metal or carbon fiber. The frame will have a hip belt at the bottom and shoulder straps, and so it's going to look like a backpack, but instead of a bag, it's just this rigid frame. Now, internal frame backpacks are going to look like a bag with a hip belt and shoulder straps. But usually on the inside, on the side that makes contact with your back, there's going to be some sort of material to give it rigidity, an internal frame. So often this is going to be lightweight aluminum. On cheaper backpacks, it might just be plastic. On more expensive backpacks, it might be carbon fiber. And this is just going to give the backpack some structure, but it's not quite as apparent as on an external frame backpack. Old external frame backpacks were often very bulky. They would have an aluminum frame shaped like a rectangle, and basically you would lash everything to this frame. Sometimes you would have specifically fitting bags that went with the frame, or you might have snap systems like snap buttons for the frame. But anything that you could lash to this frame, you could carry. So it was great for hauling heavy loads. It was great for hauling different shaped objects, especially when we didn't have all this purpose-built backpacking gear. And some modern haulers are built in the same style as these old external frame backpacks. Now, people started moving away from external frame backpacks in favor of internal frame backpacks. And that's because internal frame backpacks are a little bit more form-fitting. They hold gear closer to your center of gravity, which makes them more stable with a load, or makes you more stable with a load. They tend to look a little bit nicer. They're not as kind of utilitarian as an external frame pack. They are lighter weight because they're just using less of that heavy metal material. And so people, for backpacking purposes, almost always use internal frame packs now. That's pretty much the standard. The problem with an internal frame backpack is that you're limited on how much you can carry, right? You can only carry as much as you can fit inside the backpack, and you lose all the versatility of being able to lash anything you want to that frame. And that's a big problem for hunters, because if the hunt goes well, we're coming out with much more weight in our pack than when we went into the hunt. So that's where modern external frame backpacks come in. And so far, I've really only seen these made for hunting applications by companies like Exo Mountain Gear, Stone Glacier, Kuiu. I'm sure there's other more affordable options like Cabela's or Mystery Ranch as well. And these backpacks will look like an internal frame backpack, but instead of the frame being on the inside, it's on the outside, basically. So you have a very low profile frame, and it has a hip belt and shoulder straps, and then you can take different bags and attach them to this frame. Most of these systems are modular. And then the other great thing is that once you kill an animal, you can actually loosen the bag from the frame and put meat in between the frame and the bag, and then you can tighten it down. And that's what people are referring to when they talk about a load shelf in a bag. So it creates this great solution where you have basically an expandable capacity. You have all the capacity of your bag to put your normal gear in. And then when you have to carry a big, bulky, heavy load, you can take that and actually put that heavy weight closer to your body, which helps your center of gravity. And then you can tighten it down and walk out with an extra, however many pounds you can carry in addition to everything you have in your bag. This integrated load shelf is a really handy solution because it means that you can have a bag with smaller dimensions overall, but then when you kill an animal, you can put it on that load shelf and still carry out 100 pounds of meat. Now, not everybody likes a load shelf, so let's just talk about the advantages and disadvantages. Some of the advantages are that you can carry your meat on your pack separate from the contents of your bag. So that's nice if it's bloody or you just want to keep it in some airflow instead of putting it in with everything in your pack. You have all that extended hauling capacity like we talked about. There is some modularity with these load shelf backpacks. So if you have a modern external frame pack, you can buy the frame separately and then put whatever bag you want onto that frame. So you could buy a Stone Glacier external frame backpack, and then you could put their 5,500 cubic inch bag on that pack, on that frame, or you could put their 3,000 cubic inch bag on that frame. I'm just making these sizes up, but you get the picture. Or if you wanted to, you could take your own dry bag and potentially strap that to that frame and use that as a backpack. So that modularity is really cool. And if you ever wanted to, you could just use the frame separately as a hauler, without a bag. There are a few drawbacks though. One is that the added straps can create added weight. Some of your high-end backpacks are still going to be very lightweight, but the added complexity can add weight. And then the complexity itself can be a disadvantage. Maybe you don't want to mess with more straps and having to adjust your load. Maybe you just want to put everything in the same bag and forget about it. Another disadvantage is that it can push your center of gravity away from you if you use that load shelf. So think about putting meat on the load shelf, but then still having a very heavy bag that's now 6 inches away from the frame of your pack. Well, that's going to mess with your center of gravity. And if you're not packed well, or if you just have a heavy bag already, that can be tricky. Whereas if you had an internal frame pack or just had the capacity in your bag, you could just stack everything vertically, and that might help a little bit more with your center of gravity. And then finally, the big kicker for me is that these bags can be very, very expensive. Like I said, these modern external frame backpacks are marketed towards a very specific group of people, and those are hunters who like to backpack hunt. And so they kind of have a captive audience, and there's not really a lot of other public demand for this type of backpack. Most people are happy with an internal frame backpack for the uses of backpacking and camping and such. So that's one reason why I think some of these backpacks are so expensive. You'll see some of these bags pushing $700. And for me, that rules it out. I just don't have that much money to spend on a backpack that I'm only going to use to full capacity if I'm successful once or twice a year. So that is a big drawback. If they were less expensive, if there was an everyman's option that was still reasonably lightweight, I might have a pack like this with a load shelf. But at the moment, I still run my backpacking backpack, and so far, I've been decently happy with it. All right, let's talk about fit and comfort. The two places where you're going to notice the fit on a backpack are going to be the hip belt and the shoulder straps. And specifically with the shoulder straps, it's going to be the torso length, the distance between the hip belt and the shoulder straps. So the best way to figure out if a hip belt fits is to go try it on. You can buckle it, tighten it up, make sure it's kind of hugging your hips and not just sitting on top of your hips, and then tighten it up, and it will be pretty apparent whether you need to go a size larger or a size smaller. With the torso length, some backpacks have a little bit of adjustment built in, and sometimes it's like a Velcro system or a little hook and loop system to adjust the torso length. But you want to put the backpack on, and the shoulder straps should be resting on your shoulders when the hip belt is tight around your hips, right? If the torso length is too long and the shoulder straps are too high, all of the weight of your pack is going to be sitting on your hips, and it's going to be kind of a wobbly load. And then if it's too short, your hip belt is not going to be able to hug your hips while the backpack is on, because it will be riding up higher than your hips. So you want to test it and make sure that the shoulder straps are squarely on your shoulders while the hip belt is hugging your hips. And if you need to, you may be able to adjust it. If you're having trouble with this, try going to an REI and ask someone to help you fit your backpack. Usually they have people there who can help you with that. And also at REI, sometimes they will have some weights that they can put in your backpack, like sandbags. And this is the best way to figure out if the backpack is comfortable. You have to test it with weight. You could put on a backpack and it feels cushy and it has lots of padding, but then once you load it with 50 pounds, it just doesn't feel comfortable anymore. So do what you can to test it with a significant amount of weight. And considering that you're a hunter and not just a backpacker, try to get in over 50 pounds and just see how it feels. Some backpacks are going to feel a lot better. Some are going to distribute the weight better and carry the load better than others. And that can make a big difference when you're packing with a heavy pack. One other comfort feature that I would look for is some sort of ventilation or system that allows airflow in the surface of the backpack that touches your back. Sometimes this will be some mesh, sometimes it will be ridges that run the length of the backpack so that you can have some separation between the pack and your back. But this is going to help to dissipate heat and sweat and make you more comfortable when you're carrying that backpack. All right, everyone. Well, that was a lot of information, but I hope it was helpful for you. You know, going from backpacking to backpack hunting was an interesting sort of paradigm shift for me. I grew up backpacking and in Boy Scouts, but it wasn't until later in my life that I started to do more hunting. So from a backpacking perspective, I was always trying to carry the lightest load possible at all time. And then as I started to hunt, I was trying to figure out how to carry the heaviest loads possible without injuring myself. And as a hunter, even when I'm carrying a lighter backpack, I still have my binoculars, maybe a spotting scope and a tripod, my rifle, my game bags, all these things that people who backpack for the sake of backpacking don't have to carry. Not to mention packing out meat, right? So over the last few years, I've kind of been obsessed with carrying heavy loads. And I've actually realized that I've been doing too much. My knees just haven't felt great. So I'm swinging back away from that extreme towards a lighter backpack when possible. And I've been trying to implement some more sensible training that will ensure longevity. And that often means starting off quite a bit easier than I think I need to. So anyways, it's been an interesting experience. And if you haven't backpacked before, even just backpacking without hunting, give it a try. It's super fun. And summer is a great time to go backpacking to test your gear and get some good training in so you'll be ready for your heavy pack outs this fall. With that, I will wrap this up. Have a great week, and I will catch you on the next one.